When it comes to recording the acoustic guitar, pretty much everyone on the internet is going to tell you that you're wasting your time if you don't use a microphone on your acoustic guitar. And while I know exactly what you're talking about, I love recording an acoustic guitar with a microphone. Some of you out there may be limited to just using the DI signal from your acoustic electric. So in today's video, I've recorded a little snippet of audio using my Neumann TLM 103 and also the direct output from this Martin OM21. And what I want to show you in this video are some of the things you might want to keep in mind if you're limited to just using the DI signal. Hey everyone, my name is Chris Green. This channel is called the Home Studio Producer. I'm here to help you record, mix, and master pro quality audio all from your home studio. I hope you'll consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons to support the channel and for more videos just like this. Now let's jump into the session. All right, so here on the screen, I've got a session pulled up in PreSonus Studio One. If you are a gold tier member here on the YouTube channel, you can of course download this following the link in the community post. So the blue tracks that you see on the screen, those are the DI signals. I'm using my Martin OM21. This has an LR Baggs lyric pickup installed. So the only thing that you'll notice carved into the acoustic electric is right at the base where I plug in my guitar is right here, right where I put on my strap. And then here I've got a volume knob. It's very basic. Now, one thing that I will say right off the bat is that every acoustic guitar is going to sound a little bit different than the others. Every pickup is certainly going to sound different. My wife plays a Taylor GS Mini acoustic electric. Its pickup sounds different than my Martin OM21. That's going to come down to a lot of different factors, but don't let that scare you from today's video because I want to go over some of the philosophies of maybe what you need to keep in mind as you're mixing your DI signal. So that is going into my Apollo Twin audio interface here on my desk. Channel 1 is my DI, and then channel 2, I've got this Neumann TLM 103. It is a large diaphragm condenser microphone. As I'm recording these samples, I'm basically this far away from the microphone, and it's generally pointed at the wood section here where the neck meets the body. Now, the Neumann TLM 103 is going to be well over $1,000 if you're interested in purchasing this microphone, so please keep that in mind as we're kind of A-Bing back and forth. Certainly, I'm not going to claim in this video that I will make a DI signal sound exactly the same as a microphone. There are probably some AI tools out there that could get that job done for you, but I want to show you some basic EQ moves that I've made to try and make these as similar as possible. Now we're about to get into playing the audio, but here on my main bus, you'll notice I have an EQ plugin pulled up on screen so that you can see a frequency readout of what's happening as you're listening if you're interested in the visual cues. And then I also have this limiter plugin that's basically for the YouTube video's sake. I'm just boosting 9 decibels so that everything is at a reasonable volume compared to my speaking voice. First and foremost, let's start with the mic'd signal. The TLM 103 has absolutely no processing whatsoever. I'm using the bass level preamp that's built in the Apollo interface. So here's what that sounds like. This is a rhythm track and a picking track. And here is the processed DI signal, and we'll talk about it in just a minute. So now let's break down what these things sound like without any processing whatsoever. I'm going to go to just the rhythm guitar of the DI signal. I'm going to bypass the 2 EQ plugins I've got loaded. So here's what the DI rhythm guitar sounds like with absolutely no processing. Okay, so obviously it sounds way different. We're going to go over why I made the EQ decisions I did, but first and foremost, what are your ears telling you? First of all, the microphone or the mic'd signal It sounds more real. Typically with acoustic guitars, no matter what model you have, no matter what pickup you're using, it's going to have a lot different of a mid-range quality than what a microphone will give you. I'm also thinking that the Neumann TLM 103, if you're familiar with like Fender guitar amps, it tends to have like this mid scooped sound when I compare to the DI. So the DI is very nasally and it's very thin, whereas the microphone has a lot of low end kind of like boom punch to it. And then it has this really nice high end where it's very sparkly, but it really doesn't have that honky mid range quality that the DI signal has. So what I want to do is now you're going to hear the DI signal, and I'm going to, as the audio is playing, I'm going to bypass the EQ and then I'm going to engage the EQ so you can hear my first instance of EQ, and we'll talk about the frequencies. So here it is with no EQ and then the EQ on. Okay, so why did I make these decisions? First and foremost, when you're dealing with this DI signal, if your ears are telling you that it sounds drastically different than what that Neumann microphone does, you don't need to be mixing so much with your eyes, because many of you out there, if you're looking at this EQ plugin, you're like, wow, that looks insane. What's with all the boosts and the cuts? Aren't we supposed to be boosting and cutting by 3 decibels at a time? In this particular instance, if you need it to have a dramatic change, you probably need to boost. Like on the screen, you'll see most of my boosts and cuts here are about 6 decibels. Some of them are as going as plus 12 decibels. So first and foremost, it's the low end. So I'm going to solo this band right here. I've got the low end set to about 76 hertz. Doesn't necessarily mean that I'm looking for a lot of 76 hertz, but you notice I have a really wide Q. The Q is how wide the frequencies, how many frequencies am I messing with at any given time. So the Q is 0.47. And I've got this EQ set, this particular band, I've got it set to a dynamic EQ. I've got it set to a dynamic EQ because I don't want it to always be boosting 12 decibels at that low frequency. That might cause a little too much boominess, but when I'm emphasizing certain notes, like when I go to the basic root position E chord on the guitar, I do want that low end to come out. So let me solo that band. Here is the low end frequency that I'm primarily dealing with. So I would consider all of those frequencies to be the low end of the spectrum. And how am I treating that low end? Well, I need more low end. If I'm comparing it back and forth to the TLM 103, I need to have that boominess. I want it to really punch out at me. One thing to note too, since even the microphone has not been processed whatsoever, all I'm trying to do is get my DI signal to that starting point. So from this point on, I would treat this DI signal as if it is a mic signal. And I may want to add like an SSL EQ. I might want to add an LA2A plugin in the future, but that's not what this video is primarily aimed at. I just want to get this DI signal to sound as much like a microphone as possible. So that frequency band, I've got it at 76 hertz. With the dynamic EQ, I'm basically telling it every time it passes negative 31 decibels, I want to look to boost it a certain amount. And so I'm going to be boosting it 6 dB, and then I've got a static boost of about 9 decibels. So it will always have 9 decibels being added to the low end, but on top of that, every time I really aggressively go for that low end, it's going to add another 6 decibels, and you'll be able to see that kind of fluctuating on the screen. So this time, I want you to look at the screen. I want you to see this orange band kind of bouncing up and down, and you can tell it's bringing out the low end. So I want it to punch. Every time you see the dynamic EQ, every time you see that band go up, it is adding more to it so they get more of that fullness. So we'll listen to this, and then we'll go to the microphone. And again, let's go back to the Neumann TLM 103. Again, listening to the low end, here's the acoustic DI. Okay, let's move on to the next frequency band. So first and foremost, you want to deal with the low end. If your DI acoustic guitar is not punchy, doesn't have that low end, you may want to look around the 76 hertz all the way up to 100 hertz if you want to. If you're on a board and you're mixing this live, I know it's going to be a little more difficult because you're probably not seeing an EQ like this unless you have a digital mixer. But look for 76 hertz up to 100 hertz. Look to be adding some aggressive amounts of low end. And again, if you're doing live mixing, you may want to cut some of the low end, but maybe you don't have to with the DI signal as much. Now we need to talk about the mid-range. The mid-range quality is kind of what sets, most microphones are different because how they handle the mid-range and how they handle the treble frequencies. But I found that around 500 hertz, usually that is where honk monsters live. I don't have this currently in the dynamics mode, so this is a static EQ decision. I'm cutting almost 12 decibels at 500 hertz. So let's solo the 500 hertz band on the DI acoustic. Let's take a listen to what this 500 hertz sounds like. Okay, it sounds very honky, and this is traditional of pretty much anything you're mixing. If you're mixing vocals, if you're mixing drums, anything that sounds honky, you need to be looking around 500 hertz. I'm making a cut of 12 decibels. These are like the core frequencies of the notes I'm playing on the guitar. But again, when you're comparing a DI signal to a Neumann microphone and such, if it's got a different mid-range quality and you're trying to match it to the microphone, you will need to make some cuts on the DI signal. And think about this, whenever you have a pickup or any sort of microphone, where is it placed? Well, it's placed inside this acoustic guitar, pretty much under this piece right here. So if it's underneath and inside the guitar, there's gonna be a lot of resonance that is not spilling out into the world. So the microphone is listening to what's coming out into the room. The pickup or the microphone that's inside my acoustic guitar, it's hearing all of that resonance that's inside the body of the acoustic. And the inside part is actually not natural sounding. What we're used to hearing is the distance that our ear is from the acoustic. We're used to hearing acoustic guitars in a space. So cutting this mid-range is going to help with that. Now, I won't spend a lot of time on this one up here. I simply am just making about a 5 to 6 decibel cut. Again, this is a mid-range thing at 993 hertz, right at 1K, because now we're starting to deal with some of the harshness that you get from a DI signal. Okay, now this again I could, if you're limited on the amount of EQ, you could combine your low mids and your high mid cut. I could just make a wider Q and make a more aggressive cut. But if you have more frequency bands available, particularly if you're doing live music, go ahead and use what you have available so that you can fine tune this stuff as needed. So now I'm going to talk about the high frequencies. The high frequencies are where we're dealing with a lot of harshness. When you're using a DI, a great positive for the DI experience is that if you're doing like modern pop, like stuff that you hear from Justin Bieber, stuff that you hear from Ed Sheeran, a lot of their stuff could be attributed to just a DI signal because it is so melodic. If you're looking for transients, if you really want to hear the attack of a certain note, you're not going to get anything better than a DI signal. If you put a microphone on an acoustic guitar, most of the time it's going to have a softer curve to it than you will a DI signal. But DI signals have all that squeaking, the sliding on the neck, a lot of that harshness, the same way that we get a vocal, we need to DS. So I'm effectively making a de-esser. Right here, I've got a frequency band at 5K. I'm cutting about 6 decibels. That is a static move. So let me go ahead and solo that 5K signal. That is particularly egregious. Like if you're familiar with the sound of like ceramic plates scraping on each other, nails on a chalkboard, that's very much that area. So I wanted that one to just be a static cut. I'm cutting about, 6 decibels at 5K. That would be pretty common with a DI signal. Then I've got this high frequency shelf, and this is in the dynamic mode. Again, it's set to about 5K and it's taking out about 5 decibels static, and then another 6 decibels whenever it crosses -32. And again, if your ears have done what mine have done, it's like after a certain while, you really start to forget that you're dealing with a DI signal. So we need to reference the microphone one last time. Let's take a listen to what it sounds like with the microphone. Again, no processing on the Neumann TLM 103. And then we'll listen to the DI acoustic. And again, that's not going to be a final mix. From there, you can mix it as you would a microphone signal. You can start throwing on your EQ, your compression. You can put some reverb if you'd like. I hope that's given you some ideas about using the DI signal when you're recording acoustic guitar in your home studio. Again, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons for more videos just like this, and I'll see you on the next one. All right, bye.